Hello, and welcome to the Special Needs Sibling Podcast. Here is where we talk about what life is really like as a sibling to someone with special needs. I'm your host, Charlene, and today our guest is Aimen. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Charlene. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We start every show with getting to know a little bit more about our Sibs' families. So, Aimen, can you please lay out your family structure and the disability your sibling has?
So I actually grew up in Pakistan in a joint family household, but in my immediate family, it was my parents and then my brother Aimen and I. So we were a very close-knit family growing up. I was the elder sibling. Aimen and I had a 7-year age gap. And then in terms of his disability, so this one's a tricky one to answer because Aimen was actually born with a rare genetic disorder back in 2002, and that affected his cognitive and social abilities. So he was neurodivergent. And in his later years, he also developed epilepsy. So with his rare genetic disorder, especially in a country like Pakistan, the doctors were completely unaware of what kind of condition it was, how to even diagnose it. So it was really better understood only when my parents took him to the US for treatment. And then they were able to kind of get him the help that he needed. But over the years, obviously, that affected him in various different ways.
Yeah, that's crazy. I have some other questions about that, but which leads us into like our next section. So we generally keep it open forum on the podcast. So what would you like to talk about today?
I think there's two main things that would be good to kind of talk about, and I want to keep it as a conversation. So happy to kind of get your thoughts as we're talking about it as well. So one of the things that I actually talk a lot about on my page is just growing up in a society like Pakistan where disabilities are so misunderstood, especially due to the lack of awareness there. And then secondly, because it's December, it's actually a very fitting time to record this as well, because December is when Aimen actually passed away now 9 years ago. So just 2 weeks ago, I had his 9th death anniversary. So I've honestly contemplated whether I ever want to talk about grief, especially on a public forum. But I feel like now is the right time where I've learned to navigate it better. I've learned to process my emotions better. And especially when I see that it's something that I'm not alone with. And it is something that could potentially help people, just knowing that you're not alone with, you do have that relevant support as well. So happy to kind of talk about my own grief journey as well.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah, I think just to touch on learning how to process emotions, I feel even as just a regular person, two, especially as a sibling to someone with a disability, is like this whole other level of learning to process. Like, I think in the last month, I finally feel like I was telling my therapist, I was like, oh, what are these feelings? But they're normal things that people feel all the time. Like they feel like nervous about work, or they're like, and like they're anticipating an event, so they're like, oh, I'm anxious about this. And so I was telling her, oh, these are so weird because I haven't felt them because I had all these other emotions, right, related to like my sister and family stuff and whatever. And so I was like, so it's so weird because it's like, oh, I'm now learning what normal people feel, but much later in life. So the process is very complicated.
I love how you've just said that as well, because I think emotions for us are always so much more intensified. And it's so difficult to explain it when we're like, oh yeah, normal people don't really get it the way that we do. Obviously not to take away their feelings in any way, but I really kind of resonated with you on that because especially with like my grief journey with Aimen, I'm someone that completely blocked out my emotions initially when it happened. It took me a really, really long time to even just accept the fact that it had happened. And at that time, I was so unsure about all of these different feelings that I was feeling that I just kind of hid them away, almost built a wall around in my head. So when I was actually hit with those emotions, it just took me on an entire roller coaster. So it was very difficult to process initially. And this is about 9 years ago now, as I mentioned. So now I'm at a place where, yes, I'm comfortable to talk about it, but obviously those feelings still get heightened up for me in different scenarios. And it's not something you can control. And I think that's okay to a certain extent. But yeah, emotions always hit you differently, I guess, especially when you've had a sibling, A, growing up with a disability, B, then you have to kind of bid them farewell with that journey as well.
Yeah, and I think maybe we'll talk about kind of growing up first before we kind of get to your grieving process, because I think it will transition that way. But I was wondering, yeah, like when the cultural implications is so different, just like in the eastern part of the world in general. I think like I've talked to other people in that grew up in other countries, kind of like on the eastern side of the world, and it's so different. Like the cultural expectations for a normal family, and then like when there's a disability, it's like there could be a number of things, and some things it's like, oh, like what have you done wrong to then press that upon your child, or it's like, oh, what can you do to like, here's all the medicines and soups and foods that you can eat to then like fix it, and there's all these things. So if you want to just talk about like growing up and what that was like.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I grew up in Pakistan. So I grew up in a city called Karachi, which is quite a commercial city. So Pakistan is very diverse. So we have a lot of rural areas, there's a lot of traditional concepts there as well. But for a city like Karachi, which is quite hustling and bustling, you would expect people to have more kind of general awareness about disabilities. I would say if I start from the beginning of Aman being born, I've kind of experienced both sides of the society's reactions. On one hand, people that were close in my own circle, so obviously my parents, family members, immediate friends, people were very kind of positive in terms of the support that we needed. Obviously, it was all new for them as well, because in my own family, especially if I talk about close relatives or even close friends, I hadn't met someone with a disability before my own brother Aman. So their reactions to it was actually very positive in terms of any support that they needed. They had their own ways of kind of communicating with him, making sure that they understood his needs in whatever way they needed to as well. But then when we used to go out in public, that's where the dynamic used to change for me. And I've experienced such a different ray of emotions whenever I used to be in public out with Aman. And as a kid, because we did have that 7 year age gap, especially when I hit my early teens, it used to really frustrate me. I'll give you a few examples. In Karachi, we would be out in public spaces like the mall or a restaurant. And it was the society's looks and remarks more than anything else that really used to bother me. He wouldn't even be doing anything. Aman was literally too pure and innocent for this world, and I still say that with my hand on my heart. And I've always seen the good in him because that's all he really, really was. And he would just be kind of sitting inside the mall or even just walking around, going into the food court, and people would just have this really weird look about him, look towards him. He was a wheelchair user in the later years of his life, and I guess that kind of drew more attention as well. But even basic etiquettes that you would expect. So we would be pulling to the car park towards the mall, as an example, and it would literally be a 2 second interval for him to get out of the car, get his wheelchair out from the back, place him in the wheelchair, and then take him to the entrance. We didn't have any different accessible entrances for people that were wheelchair users. So he had to come from the main entrance at the time. And I just remember literally a second, and the honks at the back used to be beaming like something has happened. It was just that lack of patience for starters. So people wouldn't even know that, okay, people might actually have an emergency or someone might have a disability, which is why there's a bit of a delay there. So that's the first thing, right from the car experience. All this is even before hitting the entrance of the shopping mall. So you could already see how inaccessible places in Pakistan could be made to be. And, it could be in other countries as well. But I want to talk about my own personal experience in that country. And then when we would enter the mall, people wouldn't have the kind of courtesy to let a wheelchair user use the lift first. So I remember it was a family of maybe 4 or 5 people right next to us. And obviously, Aman was the only wheelchair user in the group. And they kind of just barged in, even though we were there first, they just kind of barged in, took the lift, and went. And we were like, okay, like, what do I do in that scenario? I was still pretty young as well. I think I was there with my mom or my aunt at the time. And then from that lift, we would take him to either the shops or sitting in the food court and just kind of eating out with him. And all he would be doing is just enjoying his plate of food. And he would still be getting looks from, people on the nearby tables. Because obviously, when you are someone with a disability, your behavior is different, right? The beauty of people with a disability is that they are different. And it's not something that Aman could at least control. And the looks and remarks really used to bother me. It was something that I didn't really understand because Aman was someone that I grew up 24/7, day to day. Maybe the other people hadn't actually been around people with disabilities and they just didn't know how to behave. So it was a very weird concept, having a brother with a disability and then going out to public spaces. I think the most triggering moment for me, which I still remember very vividly to date, is in the same mall. We had an experience where we were in a clothing store And Aman, I think, was kind of going through the rack of clothes. This is actually pre his wheelchair years as well. So he was a bit more healthier. This is before his epilepsy had hit him. So he was stable enough to kind of walk and navigate the store on his own. And as he was kind of sifting through the clothes, while my mom and I were still in the shop, this random woman, I think he maybe like shrugged his elbow or something on her bag and he probably didn't see her. She just turned back and she slurred the R word at him in a very, very angry way. And I think I must be maybe in my early teens at the time, and I was just listening to what I had just heard. And my mother turned around and she had the most angry look that I'd ever seen, but she very patiently and composedly just took Aman away from that woman, and she just said, "You need to apologize." And I was just baffled. Like, I was so baffled that I genuinely didn't have words to express what I just heard. And Aman, bless him and his innocence, he obviously didn't have the comprehension skills to understand what had been said to him. So he kind of just smiled. And one of my favorite things about him was just his ability to give no bullshit to the societal remarks around him. So that is one of my favorite qualities about him. And obviously, part of it is because he didn't have those cognitive abilities to understand what was happening. But it was just things like that that really made me understand that, wow, we are so behind as a country when it comes to understanding basic etiquettes, let alone awareness about disabilities. Like, you shouldn't be saying that to anyone, especially someone with a condition like Amon's. So it was just instances like that which made growing up with a sibling with disability and then taking him out to public spaces just very challenging, at least for me.
Yeah, it's so hard. I mean, it's hard being in public spaces, even in the U.S. or anywhere. I think that can be any country. But yeah, it's the. I think it's like the how extreme people get,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there's a more like subtle way where people they kind of turn their heads, or as, we as sibs obviously are much more sensitive. Like, we already know
Yeah,
you're looking without them saying anything or eye
exactly.
contact, so it's much more subtle. But like, you're definitely in a place where like everything is more extreme,
Yeah.
where people are like honking and like saying things out loud to your face, and like. But I gotta give credit to your mom if she was that composed after. Like, I'm listening to you tell me that story, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't know what I would have done if that had happened to my sister. Like, I would have just gone like, I don't know what I would have done. I would have just like stood there in shock or cried at home or something. I don't know. I don't know what
I
I
think
would
it's
have did.
just, it was one of
Yeah.
those like experiences that I mean, yes, I've been in a place in Pakistan where Aman got those looks all the time. People did look at him differently. People, I know that they were judging him. But it's one of those things where an experience like that happens, you don't know how to react. I wasn't prepared for it. But my mom is someone that I genuinely look up to in scenarios like that because she was so calm and composed, but at the same time, she just had that look on her face like, how dare you say that to my child? And I feel like I do get that badass energy from her, and I'm really glad that I do. So her strength and resilience is something that I think both Aman and I did carry forward as well. Um, I think looking back now, I would have probably been a lot more vocal than 12 or 13-year-old Aimen at the time was. I think 12 or 13-year-old Aimen was just shook and she was scared and she was like, why is my brother getting bullied for doing absolutely nothing? So it was just a very weird experience for me. And yeah, it was something that I hope no other sibling has to experience, or no one actually has to experience.
It's so interesting how people, I don't know, like I think all humans on some level, like, we all judge other people to different extents, right? Whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent or whatever. But yeah, there's definitely a like.
We actually have a very interesting or a very common saying, I should say, in my native language in Urdu back in Pakistan, which is "log kya kahenge," and that means what would people say. So anytime there's something going on, either if it's an event or you're just in the public eye, there's a very big stigma around just general societal expectations, and I guess more so for people that are, I guess, the elder sibling as well. You have to be a certain way. More so, more expectations put on you if you're a woman compared to the other genders as well. But I do feel like that is just a concept in Pakistan that people don't really get. Like, they need to just mind their own business. They need to let people be. Yeah, like, people will judge for anything and everything, I guess. And even nowadays, I'm talking about something that happened probably a decade ago, or sorry, even like 15 years ago. But yeah, it's just something that is just really shocking.
Yeah, I mean, all we can do is hope for better future, right? In all societies, is because I think now with more exposure to people with disabilities and people kind of advocating for that, because that's something that didn't exist in the early 2000s, right? It was just people talking about disabilities. Whether you're seeing people with it or not is kind of one thing, but just just meeting people who will talk about it, and like whether they're therapists or whether they're like doctors or actual people that are related to them. I think there's a lot more, we'll call it exposure therapy, for people who just had no idea, right? And I think there's a certain level where there's a transition over like a number of decades, right? Where if you had any type of neurodivergent behavior disability, whatever, you would be sent away, right? You wouldn't even be with your family, right? And so there's one transition to say, okay, now we're gonna let these people, we're gonna quote unquote expose them to like regular society, right? We're not gonna ship them into these houses where no one will see them. It's the first phase of like, okay, now they're in people's homes, but then it's kind of the stigma, right? Where
Exactly.
do I expose that to people like my friends and family, or do I keep them at home and just pretend everything is okay and just you only bring them to family events? And I think that's kind of a different thing where, like, for my extended family, like we only had dinners like like Christmas, New Year's, all the big US holidays and stuff, right? And so it was this thing where like our more immediate family knew, and we they were with my sister a lot and stuff, and that's one thing. But even with bigger family, you're like, oh, okay, like what's gonna happen? What do because they just know less, right? Like they know more than zero, which is good, but it's still different. Where last year it's gonna be different. Like she has different things, you have different things, and so that's. I remember even going to bigger family events, and I was still nervous about like, oh, what's gonna happen, or like, can I be myself or whatever? Because it's just different than if you're in your own house and everyone's just kind of more happy go
You're out of
lucky.
your, yeah, you're out of your comfort zone. You're out of, I guess, even the safe space where your siblings feel like they can just be themselves without those expectations from the society or just those looks that they would typically get elsewhere. I also feel like, the point where you said that people are often just sheltered in their own little bubble at home, and we don't necessarily want to take them out because of how people will think about them. But it's also, I guess, due to the lack of resources. How many spaces, at least back in the early 2000s, in a country like Pakistan, even had those, accessible amenities? So, did we have wheelchair ramps in every single mall back at that time? Did we have elevators that were functioning enough for people who needed to use them, that had a disability? Just basic things like, was everything just with stairs? I think Aman's experience was pretty positive in terms of getting the exposure in the right way. And I do want to give credit to my parents for that. So, yes, he was taken to family events. Of course, there were mishaps. And those are things which are unexpected and you can't always control them. But I do feel like, at least in our close knit family, he did have that protection or almost support most of the time. I will say that there were some people that I to date don't like, but again, extended
Yeah,
family.
yeah, yeah.
We don't need to talk about that. But Aman did actually go to a mainstream school. So even though he was on an SNE, so a special needs education curriculum, so he was behind his own peers in the same grade, as an example, because of his own neurodivergent and cognitive abilities. He did go to a mainstream school, so he did have access to a lot of the facilities that unfortunately a lot of other people in Pakistan that have a disability don't get to see, maybe because their parents would be fearing that actually, yeah, we just want to keep him sheltered at home and protected at home, and we don't want to really expose them to the society because it's just this big bad world and anything could happen, which is true. But Aman did go to a mainstream school. He did have his own like sports day functions where he ran his very first race. He did get on the stage on his concert and his like annual year, and he was the cutest bunny. I remember him dressed up with the makeup and costume as well. He was very passionate about music. So I guess in school, I would say the only class that he was actually really, really into was music lessons. So Aman did get the right exposure, and that is one thing that I am grateful for, because he was such a pure soul. So I'm glad that he got to see at least some good around him whenever he could.
Yeah, and that's a. I'm so happy that he got those experiences, because those it's this thing where it's like they're so hard to come by, right? But like I can remember like specific experiences with my sister where like that was like the best thing that could have ever happened, right? And it's like it's a time and place, and it's kind of like if I could just put that in a jar and put it in and keep it forever, right? Because it's those times where like they feel the most themselves, they feel the most comfortable and safe, and and like me, I feel safe with the people that are here like are all on the same page. This is not a, oh, I gotta put on the show for these people, or like, oh, these people don't like me. It's like everyone is like, no, like we're respecting this person as if they were just one of us, like a neurotypical kid or whatever it is, right? And that's a very big, like that's a very big bonus of being like a special needs siblings, but you get to access those types of moments and those people in life, and there's a lot of baggage that comes with it, but those times are like what it's like what gets you through very difficult
Exactly.
stuff.
I couldn't agree more. I do feel like being a sibling with someone with a disability, like a lot of it does shape your identity in a way that people that don't grow up with siblings that have a disability would then experience. I was, Aman and I did go to the same school. Obviously, I was much senior than him because of our age difference, but I was always known as Aman's sister. It wasn't like, oh, Aimen, like, she's not known for her grades, she's not known for her extracurriculars. Of course, that was there as well. But anytime I would be with Aman, I was meeting like my own friends' moms, or I was meeting like his friends. I was known as Aman's sister. So a lot of being a sibling with disability, like you are questioning, are you growing up to be someone you would be if you didn't have a sibling with disability? Or are you growing up someone and are you forced to grow up a bit too quickly because you do have a sibling with a disability? Although in my experience, I would say that I wouldn't change anything about how I grew up in terms of being around Aman, because like you said very rightly, it's only that experience that really then shapes you for the more difficult experiences later. So I'm so glad that I grew up with Aman and I did have him in my life, even though it wasn't for as long as I wanted to have him. It just made me a lot more stronger, a lot more resilient, and obviously a lot more independent as well, because I did have to kind of grow up too soon on my own as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something I think that has been. I mean, every sib struggles with this, but from my personal experience, talking about what's happened, right? It's just this roller coaster of I feel this way, I feel that way. Like I hate being a sib, I love being a sib, and it's just back and forth, right? But I'm wondering if we should transition into kind of like your grief process now, because now like obviously that's a very big part of your identity, but it's different now that he's not here versus before when he was. So if you want to talk about that.
Sure. So I think I mentioned in the beginning that it's the fact that we're recording this in December is it hits very close to me because December is always a very, very difficult month for me. I will say that over the years, it has become, I wouldn't say easier, but I feel like I've learned to navigate and process my own emotions and grief a lot better than when I first eventually did when the loss hit me initially. So Aman passed away in late 2015, so 10th December 2015, which is actually very ironic. So it was his epilepsy that was a big factor to his demise. And I was completely like taken aback by the fact that it had happened when it happened as well. So 9th of December is actually my birthday. I remember being in the hospital that night and he was put on the vent. And I remember the conversation the doctors were having with my parents, particularly my mother. And they were like, okay, look, we need to like talk about what we want to do because he's not going to make it. So they'd given us the news. We were prepared just the night before. But my mom was like, not the ninth. We can't do it on the ninth. Like she said something about it's Aimen's day. We just can't do it on the ninth. We need to wait till it either hitting midnight or just the morning, which was the doctor said safe to do. So they switched off the ventilator on the 10th of December. So that is when, like, I kind of bid my farewell to him. And I then moved to the UK just 10 days after. So that was a very tricky period in my life for me because I was going through the loss of my siblings. So I was actually meant to go for university to the UK in the summers of 2015. So typically your university year over here would start around August, September. And I remember Aman was sick back then as well. But I wasn't prepared that it would be just a few months later that I wouldn't see him ever again. So I did know that he was going through his own medical challenges, which of course throughout the years he was going as well. So I deferred my university course to January for the next semester. And December was when I was meant to travel with my mom. And even then it was uncertain, would Aman travel with us? So that was like a big question mark as well. But anyways, December was when I was meant to travel for university. And then obviously 10th of December happened. And I remember having a conversation with my parents, and I was like, I'm obviously not going for university. Like, I want to be here to support you guys. Because I was obviously grief stricken, but also there was this really heavy weight of guilt on me that I can't just leave everything and leave. But that's exactly what I did. And my mom, like, she was my biggest cheerleader, and I think to date she still is. She actually gave her UK visa interview the morning of the 10th of December. She got a call, I can't believe exactly when, but she got a call that, look, we need to call you in for your UK interview. I had already gotten my UK student visa at the time, and my mom got a call, and she had to be there on the 10th. She explained her circumstances. She was like, look, it's my son's funeral today. I can't like physically be there. And they said, well, we can't give you any other date. And they were never very like accommodating about it. And I guess that was part of their process, and they didn't really have any exceptions. Um, she went and she gave her interview, as composed, I guess, as anyone could give their interview. And I remember like seeing her walk through the gates back at home, completely just broken down. And it was then where I had such a weird moment that, what have I done? Like, why am I doing this? Should I like maybe like take a step back and just reassess whether I want to actually move at this sensitive time? And I remember my mom just saying to me that Aman would have wanted this for you. It's the right thing for you to do. You wanted this for so long. Now the ways are being made, and you're finally able to kind of get to a point where you want to. And in a way, I'm really glad that I made the move, even though it was one of obviously the most difficult time periods for me, because had I stayed back in a country where I was surrounded by all of Aman's things, I was surrounded in a home where Aman grew up, it would have been a lot more difficult for me to process and get away with it. I think mentally it would have taken a way bigger toll than it probably did. Of course, I did experience my own mental health issues with it as well, but I do feel like it would have been a lot more difficult had I not moved to the UK and just completely preoccupied myself with a different life. Um, I joined university. I have always been a very nerdy kid growing up. Grades was something that really mattered to me. And I thought once you get into university, you can get a bit more chill about it. But no, that wasn't me. I was still very keen to be the acer in any way I could. And I did generally enjoy my university experience. And I do credit like Aman making ways for me and just giving me the strength to kind of deal with whatever came in my way. So I would say for the first year of my university, I completely blocked out what had happened. I carried out my days as normal. Of course, in the back of my mind, there was that, okay, Mount's not physically there, but I was in a different continent at the time. I don't think I was processing it the same way I would had I lived in the same physical location as where it had happened. I carried the first year throughout university completely fine. And I think the first time it actually hit me was second year of university. For some reason, I had taken French as a side subject, or as an extra credit subject. And it was like a very beginner's course. So don't expect me to converse in French with you right now. It's actually horrible because I went to France recently and I couldn't speak like a single sentence. Anyways, so I was in a French a seminar, and we were supposed to have a mock exam. And there were two parts to the exam. One was to have a conversation to sell something in French. And the second part was that the examiner would ask you questions in French, and you had to respond in French. My question was, and I'll say it in English, which was, how many siblings do you have? And I kind of responded with none. Like I just froze and I said none. And I like excused myself from that exam. I left this like the classroom. I went back to my dorm because I was living on an on-campus accommodation. And I remember just bawling my eyes out because that was the very first time in a year's time that someone had asked me, how many siblings do I have? And I did not know that a question would trigger me so hard. Um, and I think it was also the response that really got to me. Like I responded by saying none at the time. And I don't think I'd ever, like before that, before Aman passing away, obviously if anyone would ask me, I would say, yeah, I've got a younger brother, Aman. So to say none just felt like such a weird and absurd answer for me. It wasn't something that I would have ever thought I would say. And over the years, it's taken me a while to get used to how to answer that question because it is a very common question. You could be at a work social, you could be at a first date, you could be just out with friends that you're meeting for the first time. It's just a very basic question. And It was the first time in that French exam when that question was asked in a very, very long time. And I just completely broke down because I didn't A, know how to respond to this examiner that I clearly didn't want to give enough details to. And then B, I wasn't very happy with my answer. So that was when the grief really hit me.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Also, let me know if this topic gets a lot for you.
Oh,
I'm happy to kind of hold back, by the
oh
way.
no, don't worry about it.
Okay.
I think I'm just it's one of those like things where um I guess to kind of talk about when we first introduced you, right? Like this is something that's been like a long time coming. Like we met much longer before that we're recording now, right? And it's something where between timing and you processing and things, it's I'm really glad that you decided to be able to share your story because it's important, right? And I think it's one of those things where it's a lot, but at the same time it's there's only so many people who are even going to remotely understand what you're talking about, right? And I think there's a certain that's a whole different thing, and which I can't describe. You understand what I'm talking about. Other Sibs understand. I can't explain it to regular people, and that's not my job, right? It's just to have a conversation about like this, and yours is like an example, right? But these are the types of topics where they're this complicated. Like this is like our daily life, right? Maybe not to the extent of someone passing, but there's very real like triggering experiences that will trigger like this happened to me when I was 5 at the mall and this thing happened, right? And that is for most people that's like, oh, like I had this bad memory, right? But for us it's so much deeper than that, right? It's this core memory and feeling of, am I important? Do I matter? What do I do? Who cares about me? Right? And that is a very Sib experience thing, right? And so it transpires in different ways for different people, right? Whether that's like through more like abuse related things or like neglect related things, or like in your case a grief related thing, right? Like we kind of every Sib has their own like version, I'll say, of what this experience is, and it kind of manifests itself whether it kind of manifests itself unfortunately like in our like 20s and kind of this like identity crisis, because to your point earlier, right, like so much of our identity growing up is very much attached to our sibling, unintentionally so, right? Like we love our siblings, our parents love us is the hope, and in an ideal circumstance, right, even in the best cases scenarios where I've talked to people where like they grew up happy and whatever, like there's still this identity crisis and crossroads where we go, I love my sibling and they matter, but do I matter as me? And like what do I do with that, and who am I? And there's all of those things, right? And so it's it's so hard because no one understands those, right? Like I've been with my husband for a long time. Like I think we've been together over a decade at this point that we're talking. Yeah. And he has a better understanding of it because I've, through osmosis and him being with my sister and me going through therapy and whatever, but it's not the same as when we're talking, right? And even though my sister is currently with me now, I still feel like all of those things that you're describing, and there's so much power in you being able to share that with me, and that itself is like a big deal, right? Like to know that, like I don't understand it like 100%, but I
Mhm.
understand probably more than
Of
most
course.
people that you've ever
Of
tried to talk to
course.
about it.
And I think,
Yeah.
honestly, for me, I think Aimen 10 years ago would be so proud of Aimen now having this conversation with you
Yeah.
today.
a
Because
hundred
I don't
percent.
think that Aimen would be able to, A, get on a podcast, B, talk about it without actually choking up or crying in mid sentences. So I'm actually really glad that I'm finally at a point within my grief journey where I feel comfortable that I can openly talk about it. Because I have for a very, very long time just kind of deflected away from the topic because A, it is such a heavy topic. B, people aren't always great listeners. I think the first step to your process is finding your own support system and just someone really being there to listen without you feeling like you're trauma dumping on them. They need to be kind of just there to support you. You obviously don't want to talk about anything heavy unless they're willing to listen and unless they're okay with it as well. But you want to start off with your smallest circle first, your smallest circle of close friends or family or whoever, your partner at the time first. And it took me a really, really long time to do that because I feel like I did have a really, really supportive group of friends and family circle that I could speak to. But then there was also people when that I would meet, let's say, organically through work or universities, where it was just such a sensitive subject that I would just, not want to demotivate or almost bring out bad vibes to the crowd. So it's just a topic that I would always steer away from. And I'm so glad that now I'm at a point where I can be open about it because I know that I'm not alone and I know that how many other people go through it. And one, I actually remember our first conversation when you were telling me how you started your podcast was you've come across support channels for parents and just caregivers in general, but not something that talks about the sibling experience, which is why I absolutely loved listening to your podcasts as well. And I feel like other siblings need to know that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to find your own support system and do whatever makes you feel better. There's no timeline to understanding grief. It doesn't take like a minute, it doesn't take a year, it doesn't take 10 years. It takes however long I guess it takes for you. Everyone's grief process is going to be different, whether it's losing your sibling, your partner, your parent, or whoever, whichever loved one you're talking about. But for me, like losing Aman was just such a big loss because it was A, the most beautiful relationship I'd ever had, and B, it was someone that I grew up with 24/7. And I have just learned so much from him. And I honestly, I feel like I still continue to learn from him. Even though he's not physically there with me, his positivity, his resilience, his encouragement, even though his like innocent little voice of words of encouragement still kind of stay with me, very close to me, especially in the most difficult moments, as you had mentioned earlier as well. So I do feel like I'm a lot more comfortable in talking about it now versus when I was back then.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's so important for all sibs to know that all your feelings are valid. Like every single one of them, right? Because I feel growing up with my sister, I felt like whether it was it's probably subconscious, and I don't know if this is more like of an older sibling thing or not, right? But it was this always thing where I was like, I don't want to be mad at her, even though I was. Right, and I'm not trying. At that age, when you're like 5 or 10 or whatever, you don't know what's happening, right? But you can feel it. You can feel like, oh, like she's upset, but like I want to help, but I'm also mad at her because she technically stole my stuff, right? Like I deserve to be mad at her because she's like. So for example, I was in the second grade, so I would have been like 8 or 9, and I had flashcards like for a test, and so I go through it. She dumped them all in the toilet. So like, right, and so and when I look back at that, I go, I was sad and I was upset, but like it was this weird thing where it was like it was just I didn't know what to do with it, right? Because I was like, am I mad at? I am mad at she threw him in the toilet, but like I wouldn't let myself like feel it 100%. I kind of just stood there looking at the toilet and then looking at her and then going like, right? But and it's been so interesting as I've gotten older, right? Where there's so many emotions that I didn't know that I had, right? Just because I was so used to like, oh, like suppressing it, blocking it out, right? Kind of like you're very aware of what that's like, right? You move on, you just do something else, distract yourself, whatever. So I used to just I used to keep busy a lot more because I went, oh, I don't need to hear my internal thoughts or feel my feelings. I'll just like go through these things and like help other people and be out of the house and whatever. But it's so important to acknowledge that like, oh, I am very angry like at my sister, or I'm very angry at my parents, or like I'm very sad right now because nothing is going the way that I want, right? And I think there's so much power to also validating your own feelings because it's so easy to just get entwined in the, oh, my brother feels this, my sister feels this, my parent, like it's so easy to just kind of hop on the train of whatever they're feeling or kind of force yourself, oh, but like if I make everyone else happier, then everyone will be happy, right?
Yeah.
And that's not our job, right? At the end of the
I do
day,
feel like it's a very like older sibling mentality. I
it
just
very much could be.
Yeah, I feel like as older siblings, you just start kind of, it's like this innate responsibility that's just put on your shoulders without you actually volunteering for it. It's just something that's a given. And I don't remember like saying, "Oh, actually, I'm okay with this responsibility," even though I was 7 years old at the time. Not saying that I would change anything about it, but yeah, it was something that was kind of just almost put on you, and it was a lot. It still does feel a lot to date as well if I reflect back on it. I remember having my moments where Aman would do certain things. I would be preparing for a test, and I did have my own bedroom growing up, so I would lock the door when I was revising just so I wouldn't be disturbed. And I remember he would be like knocking on the door, like he would be playing music or watching Dora the Explorer at like the highest volume in the next room because we did have joining rooms. And I would just be so annoyed. I was like, I really need to study for this test and I really need to prepare for this exam. And of course, I would like have those emotions as well. And I remember like when he initially did pass away, I would be thinking, oh my God, I shouldn't have actually felt that way. Maybe I shouldn't have been so bitter. Maybe I should have just, I guess, blocked my feelings more or concealed them more. But now that I've evolved from that experience, I just think it's good that I felt what I did. It was important to let it out and vent and just make sure that I'm doing what I needed to do because my feelings are valid as well. Of course, he's important, but so am I. So you want to be able to make sure that you're putting yourself, if not first, because I do feel like as a sibling to someone with a disability, you don't always feel like you are um, putting yourself first. And I guess that's part of being a sibling with someone with a disability. It wasn't so much about neglect for me because luckily my mom at least did a great job of raising both of us very equally. Yes, I know that he needed the additional attention, care, but I did feel it a lot in certain moments as well, especially when they took him to the US and I was back in Pakistan alone with my grandparents when he took him for his treatment. But yeah, I think we need to understand that as siblings, we're also important. Of course, our siblings matter. Of course, they've got their own needs, but we also need to put ourselves first. And time to time, doing that is okay.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's very much like we need to stop being in last place. Right, like even for people who are like working on it, right, like even if you do want to be first or second, whatever, but I think a lot of it's, I know for me, like it's just not being last, right? Like if I was in a room of people, I would just make myself the least important, even though that's not true, right? It's we're all humans and we can all share the same space, right? But it's I can vocalize, like, oh, I need this, I need that, but yeah, excellent. So I guess to round us off, what are your words of encouragement for all the Sibs listening out there?
I just want to say, first of all, thank you for listening to us. I think my biggest takeaway from my own experiences with someone with a disability is that it's okay to be different and it's okay to accept that your sibling's different, but also just recognize that you as an individual are a person. You're a complete person on your own. Your identity isn't attached with your sibling, but try and take away positives from your experience with your sibling. I do remember early on when Aman passed away, there was a lot of, I wish I'd spent more time with him. I wish I'd taken more pictures with him. I wish I'd shared more experiences with him. Now I'm at a place where I'm a lot more comfortable and I just look back at all those moments in a very positive way. But just enjoy your experiences with your sibling, but also focus on yourself. Get yourself that personal space whenever you need it. If you need to find your support bubble to vent out, rant, do it. It doesn't have to be with people that you're not comfortable with. It can just be one person that's willing to listen, whether it's your therapist, whether it's your partner, whether it's your friend. Find your support system. For me, what really helped was starting my own page because I wasn't verbally vocal about it. I used to write about my experience with Aman, and I think that helped me the most. That's why I was able to articulate in whatever way I felt comfortable because I was controlling the words that were going to be posted from my side. So that like helped me. And I'm not encouraging everyone to get on a public forum and write about something if they don't want to. But I just feel like you taking the first step to be open and just find someone that's willing to be there to listen is a good step forward. And my last bit of advice would be just be a bit more kind. You don't know what people might be going through, whether it's someone with a disability or not. Try and just understand things from their perspective as well, and just be kind, be more open-minded, I guess, to learn and be educated. It's never too late to learn. My friends took them a while as well to understand Aman's difficulties and Aman's differences. And I'm so glad that now I'm at a place where I'm very comfortable to talk about my brother in a way that I am just talking to you about as well. So they now understand how, I guess, it was to be with a sibling with a disability. So yeah, my two pieces of advice would be focus on yourself as well and just enjoy every moment with your sibling that you can.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on, Charlene, and you've been a wonderful host.
Thanks for listening to the Special Needs Sibling Podcast. I hope you had a good time listening and feel encouraged in your own journey as a sibling to someone with special needs. If you liked this episode, please share it with your friends. And if you want to hear more stories, please subscribe to the show. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, the show can't happen without you. All special needs siblings have their own unique stories, challenges, family dynamics, and lots of life to talk about and explore. This podcast is here to let you know that you're not alone and that you matter. If you would like to be on the show or just chat off the record, please contact me. My info is in the show notes. Until next time, this is the Special Needs Sibling Podcast.